Steve here. It's the show where I answer your questions, and this week my first question comes from specific hieroglyphics. Hey Steve, if in our lifetime robots and AI reach our levels of intelligence, reasoning, and emotion, will you be an ally of robot rights? I know it might sound far-fetched, but I believe mankind will go that far if we don't launch any nukes and destroy all of human civilization. It really depends on how soon this happens. If it happens while I'm still in my relatively young idealistic phase, then I will be all for robot rights. If it happens a little bit later when I've entered my crusty, resentful old man phase, then who knows, maybe I will be among those shaking our fists and yelling, "No rights for robies!" It just depends. Timing is everything. I do think that it's an interesting question to ponder, though, because it seems like every time a particular group advocates or agitates for their basic human rights or for recognition or for some help in combating oppression they face or what have you, there's always some group of people that feel like, okay, that should be it, like we should cap it. You know, like, okay, we'll give trans people equality and we'll recognize their basic humanity and we'll sort of reorient a few things to make sure that they have a good life. But that's it, okay? No more. You know, we've done different races, we've done different genders, we've done different sexualities, now we've done gender identity, so that's it now, everybody, okay? We're done. It feels like that's the attitude that a lot of people have. Like, I'll support it this far, but if there's another group that comes up wanting their rights, well, oh, God, come on, forget it. If Star Trek: The Next Generation, which turns 30 this week, has taught us nothing else, it has taught us that beings which have consciousness and self-awareness and sentience, the ability to think and perhaps even to feel, they deserve rights. They deserve to be recognized as individuals, as living beings, and they deserve to be treated with respect and afforded equality under the law. It doesn't matter what they're made of. It doesn't matter what kind of machine they are, biological or mechanical. If they have attained that level of sophistication and self-awareness, then their rights ought to be respected and protected under law. So yeah, I would be all for robot rights. If it was me right now, you know, who knows? Maybe I'll become a resentful, bitter old man in my later years, and I'll resent the robots wanting their rights. I mean, in my day, robots knew their place. I hope that is not who I turn into. If I do, maybe someone will be kind enough to show me this YouTube video of my younger, more idealistic self, and I could say, oh wow, I did turn into an asshole, didn't I? Scott Bresinger, do you think libertarianism has become a religion? It was originally intended as more of an economic stance in line with free market capitalism, but there's a strain that's developed in recent years that has embraced social Darwinism, a gross and deliberate misreading of Darwin, but that's another story, and has been so fervently held that it can best be classified as fundamentalist in its approach. Many of the worst YouTube atheists have adopted it. Maybe it's a kind of replacement religion, as I'm sure you know all too well. Adherents claim to love science and reason, even as they promote harmful pseudoscience, and are generally unreasonable. If this is indeed the case, how can you inform a fundamentalist that they are indeed fundamentalists without them losing their shit? Is there a positive way forward with this mob of pretend individualists, or are they simply to be avoided? I don't think it's fair to call libertarianism a religion. I sort of resist the urge to classify any ideology that people become zealously devoted to as a religion. Although I do think you can make comparisons to religion. You can say maybe they are as devoted to it as followers of a religion, but I don't think it's fair to say libertarianism is a religion or is functioning as a religion. I'd rather just avoid making that comparison. But yeah, I agree with you that there are a lot of people who identify as right libertarians or who hold beliefs that could fairly be classified as right libertarian beliefs that have expanded that ideology well beyond the economic sphere. You can see how toxic and self-destructive it is by looking at some of the people who hold to that view the most zealously. And I think in many cases, it's just an act of self-justification. You get to tell yourself, well, I'm not accountable to anybody else. I don't have to consider the feelings or the interests of other people, and no one else has the right to try and hold me accountable or try to make me answer for anything I've done or anything I've said, because we're all just islands unto ourselves, and you don't have a right to hassle me, and I can hassle you if I want, but it doesn't matter because you shouldn't complain about it because my words can't hurt you. And it's just a way of building a sort of bubble around yourself to make you safe from all accountability, and to sort of claim a kind of ultimate unpenetrable protection for yourself, even if it does occur at the expense of other people. And yet it's an incredibly self-centered, toxic worldview. And how do you break people out of it? How do you tell what you might call a fundamentalist libertarian that they are not being reasonable, that they are not being scientific, that they are not being logical, that they're being not only self-destructive, but destructive to their community and to their society by behaving this way and thinking this way? I mean, how do you reach a religious fundamentalist? You can share the facts with them, you can appeal to their emotions, you can try to convince them that a society where everybody respects each other and also works together and takes responsibility for each other is better for everybody. But if they're not buying it, they're not buying it. There may be nothing you can do. There may be something you can do to reach maybe people who are followers of theirs, people who look to them as an authority or as a reasonable person. You may be able to present them with an alternative view, with a better way of thinking and living that is a bit more community-oriented, that is a bit more others-centered than self-centered. May work for some people, won't work for everybody, but it's worth a shot. Carlisle the Cinephile, you've said on several occasions that you don't really care for musicals, but have also made your appreciation of Hamilton known. Are there any other musicals that you find yourself enjoying despite your lack of interest in the genre as a whole? None to the extent that I enjoy Hamilton. I got the soundtrack to Book of Mormon a few years ago, and I enjoy that because I think a lot of the songs there are really funny. So I enjoy that, but I've never seen the show or really even felt a strong urge to see the show the way I would love to see Hamilton, for example. I guess now that I'm a little older and I have a bit more appreciation for certain art forms that maybe aren't necessarily my favorite art forms, I have a weird sort of fondness for some of the Rodgers and Hammerstein musicals that we watched when I was in school. From middle school to high school, I saw most of the major filmed versions of the big Rodgers and Hammerstein musicals, like Oklahoma and Carousel and South Pacific, and I can muster a certain appreciation for those, and I can appreciate particular songs from some of those shows, but I don't know if I'd call myself like a huge fan of them. It's more that I've gained the ability and maybe the maturity, if I can pay myself a compliment that I may or may not deserve, to appreciate them without necessarily being over the moon for them. With Hamilton, I genuinely love that and feel like that's a great work of art, a wonderful piece of writing and performance and composition, and I have just incredibly deep, sincere appreciation for it. Whereas with some of the other ones that I've mentioned, I can appreciate it maybe from a distance. I can say I acknowledge that there's a lot of skill and talent on display there, but it doesn't necessarily hit me and touch me in my heart the way Hamilton does. So Hamilton is still kind of my major lone exception to my general dislike of musicals. J. Dodify, Steve, the most obvious question. What did you think of Discovery? Yes, indeed, the most obvious question. And also, Mr. Croup also asked about Discovery, specifically about some pacing issues that he saw in the first episode. I liked it a lot, actually. I do think that some of the people who really liked it are maybe going a bit overboard. I didn't think it was like a life-changing work of genius or anything, but I certainly didn't think it was bad. And I thought a lot of it was really, really good. I like all of the performances. I like the way that even though we're only with them for a relatively short period, the crew of the starship Shenzhou has a feeling of camaraderie and comfort with each other. You feel like these people have served together for a long time and they know each other and they're comfortable with each other, even though we as viewers are just meeting them. I think that's a really impressive accomplishment for a new show. And I love Michael Burnham. I love the main character. I think she's going to be really interesting. She's obviously a very flawed, very troubled character. A lot of stuff going on in her head. We can't count on her to always make the right decision or the smart decision or the moral decision. But I think we can count on her to be a compelling protagonist for this series. And that's something that is very, very important. It reminds me of Star Trek in all of the ways that matter. I think it gets what Star Trek is, essentially. But I think it's also introducing some complications, some challenges to that classic Star Trek idealistic, optimistic worldview that could be the source of some really compelling drama in the next 13 episodes that we have to go. So I really enjoyed it. It's the first Star Trek show that feels written and plotted like a miniseries. You know, the structure of the show, the plotting of the show, feels more like we're seeing chapters in a larger story as opposed to single self-contained episodes, which even when Deep Space Nine was doing saga storytelling in its last couple of seasons, you still felt like the episodes were mostly self-contained. This definitely feels more like a Netflix show, where each chapter is sort of, okay, point A to point B, now point B to point C, and it's clearly episodes in a much longer overarching story. Star Trek has never really attempted anything quite like that, so that feels different, but different in a good way. And I mean, I know the big controversy among a lot of Trekkers before the show started was the Klingon redesign. I'm already used to it. I don't think the Klingon redesign is bad at all. I kind of dig it. It's very different. It's very different from the previous looks that Klingons have had in other shows. But like I say, I have already made the adjustment. I think it's fine. And I love the conceit that they've held to so far of having them speak Klingon when they are among other Klingons instead of translating it or having them speak English. I really like that. So yeah, overall, good start. I'm in it for the long haul. I'm looking forward to seeing the rest of the series. So far, so good for Star Trek Discovery. Dr. Babylon, Steve, in your opinion, are white supremacy, misogyny, queer phobia, and religious fanaticism malicious tumors that need to be removed for the Republican Party to survive, or are they the party's vital organs? I once believed that shifting demographics and cultural attitudes would eventually force the Republican Party to abandon its bigotry in order to become competitive, but instead they traded their dog whistles for megaphones. I don't think this is sustainable, but maybe that's just wishful thinking on my part. What are your thoughts on this? Well, it's sustainable at least for the near future because not enough of their base is dying off or leaving the party to really endanger. I mean, as Trump showed, even though Trump lost the popular vote quite decisively, he did manage to win in enough key precincts to win the presidency through the Electoral College. So, and we see in Alabama, the Alabama Republican senatorial primary, Roy Moore won the primary. Roy Moore, even though he was not endorsed by Trump, is very reflective of the same sort of attitudes that the Trump base values. You know, this sort of hardcore far-right Christian fundamentalism, extreme paranoia toward non-white people, toward immigrants, toward LGBTQ people, just a very hard-line neoconservative, pandering to racists, pandering to white supremacy kind of Republican Party that is still alive and well and is extremely viable in many parts of the country, unfortunately. So I don't think it's going to hurt them in the near future. Now, in the long run, the demographic changes of the country, I think, will render that a losing strategy, but I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon, unfortunately. And as for are those things, is white supremacy and xenophobia and sexism and religious fanaticism and queer phobia, all of these things, are they tumors or are they vital organs? As the party currently exists, they're vital organs. The Republican Party is a white supremacist party. You can't get away from that. The policies it supports and wants to enact are white supremacist policies in the sense that they would disproportionately harm non-white people, and they are clearly pitched and campaigned for toward white people who harbor resentment toward non-white people. That's the way the party has oriented its sales pitch. Those are the people it's clearly after, and the policies it wants to enact will hurt people other than those people. It is a white supremacist party. So no, it's not. They're not tumors. They're vital organs. That's what the party is. Joe McClory, I know that you have said you are not much of a fan of American football, but have you taken any time to watch videos of a growing number of players and teams protesting during the anthem? Do such protests help restore pride in the nation, lost at the fact such protests are even needed? They do help. They do help a lot, I will say, even though I have never been and still am not a football fan. I am very willing and very proud to show some solidarity with the football players and other athletes as well who are taking the knee and who are protesting white supremacy, police brutality, the various grotesque offenses of Donald Trump during the national anthem before games. I support them 100%, and I am very grateful that they are using their platforms, their voices, their visibility to do this and to bring attention to something that is incredibly important. It's very heartening. Someone said on Twitter, who would have believed that in 2017 jocks would be the agents of social change? And that might be overstating it a little, but it is worth stating. It is worth saying that these are people who have the eyes of the country upon them. These are people who, someone else tweeted that, you know, for many white Americans, watching NFL football and NBA basketball during the week is probably the most attention they ever pay to black people and to elements of black culture. And so for these mostly black athletes to do this, to make this protest, knowing that the number of people watching them are predominantly white people, many of whom would not be exposed to this kind of political protest and perhaps would not be prompted to think about the issues that underlie that protest were it not for them. I think it's amazing, and I think they deserve a pat on the back, and I think they deserve a lot of applause and, more importantly, a lot of support. I am more than happy. I would say I'm more than happy to stand with them, but it would be more, I suppose I should say I would be more than happy to take a knee alongside them and to support them in their protest. And obviously it must be doing something, because the President of the United States is continuing to lose his shit over this on social media and demand that they be fired and demand that the NFL ban people from doing political protests during the anthem and trying to stir up all of this ugly racist phony patriotism by saying like, oh, they should be forced to respect the flag and they should be forced to stand for the anthem, because that's clearly the kind of patriotism that Donald Trump and his most ardent supporters want. That's the only kind that they recognize. Just blind, obedient patriotism. You know, that's our flag, therefore we stand for it. No matter what is happening in the country, no matter what kind of change we may want to bring about, it ought to be just automatic. You stand for the flag, you stand for the anthem, that period. You know, you're not allowed to deviate from that. That incredibly authoritarian version of patriotism is what Donald Trump wants and expects, not just for the flag, but also for himself as well. And I think it's important that that has been brought out yet again, and arguably in a more blatant, undeniable way than ever before. So I think we owe the athletes, that Colin Kaepernick, who started this whole thing, and all of the others who have picked up that ball and continue to carry on these protests, I think we owe them all a debt of gratitude and a lot of thanks and our support. And having done 260 of these videos now, I probably owe you folks who are watching a decent segue from this segment to the next segment. But I can tell you this, it's not going to happen this time.
The lightning round.
Kievar, did you get the idea for Sourball from Eddie Izzard's bit in Dressed to Kill, in which he says, La souris est sous la table? Apologies once again for my terrible French accent. Others have probably noticed this before, but I haven't seen it addressed. So, Inspiration or coincidence? Coincidence. I called it sour ball because it's a corruption of the literal French meaning mouse ball, and I figured if it was a real American sport, it would have started with the original French name, and then it would have, been repurposed by us ignorant English-speaking Americans into something a little easier for us to say. Hence, sour ball, mouse ball. So there you go. Sabrina Lozides Meredith, do you have a favorite children's book, one that you still read or that affected you as a child so much that you still refer to it? In a way, my opinion of it has shifted drastically since I was a kid, but I would have to say The Giving Tree by Shel Silverstein, which I still think is a beautiful book, but for very different reasons that I did when I was a kid. Now I read it as an adult, and I think, oh, that poor tree. That tree gave everything it had to that child, and the child just kept taking and taking and taking, and the tree it was quote unquote happy the whole time. Now I sympathize much more with the tree that winds up as a stump at the end than I do the boy who grows into the man. But yeah, The Giving Tree, I would say. Rashid QE, Steve, with the state of America being what it currently is, Trump being president, white supremacy, anti-healthcare, anti-atheist, do you ever feel ashamed to be an American? Oh, every day. Are you kidding me? Yes, I feel deeply ashamed to be an American on an almost daily basis. And I know that it's not always logical. I know that collective guilt isn't always something that we should feel. But I feel it nonetheless. It's an emotional response that I have. I feel terrible that Donald Trump is our president, not just for the pain and suffering that he and people who support him are inflicting on my fellow Americans, but for the message it sends to the rest of the world. Hey, this is the guy we picked to lead us. These are the values we choose to live out. It's terribly embarrassing. I'm very ashamed to be an American. Yes, absolutely. The raddest scorpion, if I laugh at a racist's joke at first and then realized the joke is racist, should I feel bad that I laughed? Or should I feel good that I noticed it and that it was racist even though I laughed? Thanks for the hard work as always and keep it up. Well, it's not for me to tell you how you should respond, but you can do both. You can laugh at the joke and feel bad after you realize how racist it is, but then you can also, pat yourself on the back for figuring out that it was racist and realizing that maybe you shouldn't have laughed. You can do both. It's okay. Lucas Hackett, Steve, which one of these characters would you think would make a better president than Donald Trump? Alex P. Keaton, Steve Urkel, Al Bundy, or Sheldon Cooper? P.S. Am I the only one who thinks both Dean Winchester from Supernatural and Cody Lambert from Step by Step nearly look a bit identical to each other nowadays? I don't watch Supernatural, but I've seen pictures, and yeah, they do look very similar, don't they? They do look very similar. Any of those would be better than Trump. I would suggest maybe Alex would be the best of the lot, because he would probably at least have some knowledge of economics. And, it's been like 30 years since we've seen Alex Keaton, so maybe he's grown up and become a Democrat, which is the headcanon that Michael J. Fox recommends. He says he grew up and became a Democrat. So if that's true, I would say Alex P. Keaton. But any of them, Al Bundy would be so much better of a president than Trump. Oh, Steve Urkel? Hey, we wouldn't have to worry about cutting funding for the sciences now, would we? No, all of them would be better. Malevolent Divinity, why do people not wear toe shoes? They're so amazing. I think it's just that they look weird. I mean, I've never worn them myself. I can imagine that they would be very comfortable because you wouldn't have your toes all crammed into a single, like a solid shoe like that. I can imagine they're very comfortable, but I've never worn them. And because they are so unusual, because they are so against the sort of social norm of what a shoe is, I don't know, I might feel a little weird wearing them in public. It's not a good thing. It's not something I would be proud of. You shouldn't care, but I might feel a little strange wearing them in public. I think it's that. It's the social pressure of those aren't shoes. You're not wearing you're not wearing those hippie hiking shoes, are you? Something like that. I think that's probably it. Harry Ray, I've just started listening to podcasts because of an awesome one called Pretty for an Aboriginal. Can you recommend any social justice ones? And do you appear regularly on any podcasts? I think there's one called Lemme something. Not sure if you've mentioned it before. You got me there. The podcast I mention at the end of every one of these videos. Yes, I've mentioned it before. I would recommend the Gaytheist Manifesto hosted by Callie Wright. I think that is fantastic. great social justice podcast, and also in a similar vein, the Inciting Incident podcast with Marissa McCool. Those are excellent. And, serious inquiries only. It's not necessary with Thomas Smith, not necessarily always about social justice issues, but when Thomas does address a social justice relevant topic, he's usually on the right side of it and always gives a very well considered, articulate, and funny take on it. So I would recommend those: the Gaytheist Manifesto, the Inciting Incident podcast, and also Serious Inquiries Only, just off the top of my head. That's it for the questions. That's it for the lightning round. It's time now for the shout out, and the shout out this week goes to a project that is dedicated to helping hurricane recovery in Puerto Rico. On my most recent Patreon hangout, which I had last weekend, I mentioned the hurricane that hit Puerto Rico, and I recommended that everyone go check out UNICEF's Puerto Rico Hurricane Marie relief page and donate if you possibly can. And I want to second or repeat that recommendation to go support UNICEF if that's what you want to do and if that's what you're able to do. But I'm also going to bring to your attention another project that is about bringing relief and raising funds to provide relief for not only hurricane relief in Puerto Rico, but also hurricane and earthquake relief in Mexico. So the project that I am bringing to your attention for the shout out this week is the Hispanic Federation's UNIDOS Relief Fund. This has been created by the Hispanic Federation, and it is raising money to support earthquake and hurricane relief in Mexico and also hurricane relief in Puerto Rico, two regions that have just been devastated in recent weeks by natural disasters. They are very much in need of help and support. So if you have a few spare bucks lying around and you want to give them to a good cause, consider giving them to the Hispanic Federation's UNIDOS Fund to support hurricane and earthquake relief in Mexico and Puerto Rico, because they really do need our help right now. Thank you if you do. That's it for the shout out. I also want to recommend, as always, as Harry mentioned in his last question on the lightning round, there are some podcasts that I recommend regularly. One of them is a podcast that features me in every episode. These are, of course, the Lemme Listen family of podcasts, and specifically the Late Seating Podcast, which is a movie review podcast co-hosted by me and also the excellent and wonderful Jason Harding, where we watch classic movies, we give them a fresh review, we decide for ourselves whether or not they deserve their reputation, whether that reputation is good or bad. And oh, do we have a doozy for you folks this week. Our new episode drops today, and it is our review of the classic 1963 Jerry Lewis comedy, The Nutty Professor. If you can probably divine what my opinion of the film is just by my manner of introducing it to you now. But look, we had to watch the original Nutty Professor, so the least you folks can do is to listen to our review of it and listen to whether or not we thought it was a classic or not. Or otherwise it was for nothing. We watched the Jerry Lewis Nutty Professor for nothing if you don't listen to this episode. That's what I'm saying. And if you can live with that, if you can stand to bear that weight on your shoulders, then you know what? More power to you. I couldn't. I wouldn't want to be responsible for that. So if you want to listen to the new episode of Late Seating where we review the Nutty Professor, or you want to listen to any of the past episodes of Late Seating or any of the episodes of any of the other awesome Lemme Listen podcasts, you can do so by going to lemmelistenpodcast.com. And I sure wish that you would, because, to reiterate, we watched the Jerry Lewis Nutty Professor for a show. And it hurts. It was just... Okay, anyway, there you go. That's the podcast shout out. That's it for me, everybody. I'm done. I'm out of here. I want to remind you, as always, to please leave a comment on this video asking me your question for next time. You can ask me anything about anything. Nothing is too serious. Nothing is too silly. I will answer as many of your questions as I possibly can in the next You Had to Ask video. So please do leave a comment on this video asking a question for next time. That's how it works. For these videos to happen, you have to ask. So please do ask, if you would. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you very much for your wonderful, kind attention. And I will see you next time. Take care, everybody. Hey folks, one more thing before I go. I hope you enjoyed this one. If you did, please like, share, and subscribe. And also, please consider helping me to make more videos like this one by supporting this channel through Patreon. You can go to www.patreon.com/Steve Shives to become a patron of this channel. Thank you so much. See you next time.